when I take a look at Africa, we are that continent in the world where we have the greatest number of young people that are potentially going to be impactful in the next coming decades. I had a lot of rejections and so many other places I also met a lot of rejections. But one of the things that I think was so important was never tying my identity or my self-worth to what I can do.
I'd just like to play a little game. It's called the Line Recall Challenge. And because you're one of those guys who create a lot of content on your LinkedIn, you always write your thoughts, put them there for people to read or get inspired. So I want to see how much you remember what you said, and you'll say why you said it, where you said it.
I hope I won't be caught for that.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of International Mic Check. My name is Judesha Jose and I would like to wish you a happy new year. I hope you had a wonderful time with your family and you have entered the new year with new aspirations, with new dreams, with new goals. And I hope whatever that you promised yourself in the previous year, you have already started executing it. Today I bring you none other than the most amazing people on campus, and his name is Innocent Farai Chikwanda from Zimbabwe. And he describes himself to be as a thought leader. And I would like to read his bio for you because it's really long and I couldn't cram it in my head. But I'll read it for you. It's really an amazing bio that I've ever seen. So it goes like this. Innocent Farai Chikwanda is a thought leader, passionate about seeking, engineering, and communicating solutions to social and technological problems that affect African communities. He's the founder of Carriot, an edtech startup that provides free digital and internet access to rural schools in Ghana through a solar-powered internet-enabled mobile digital lab. Innocent has also gained international exposure by attending the Baobab Summit in Kigali, in Rwanda, of course, as one of the MasterCard Foundation scholars selected from Ashesi University. In his junior year, he had an exhibition on Carriot in South Korea to represent how Ashesi is impacting design in Africa. Wow, this is amazing. And the most important thing about himself, he believes that one day Africa will become a beacon of global technology and commerce. Man, this was amazing. Welcome to my podcast. This was the best way to welcome you, man.
I'm happy to be here. I was wondering why the bio is going to be long. I discovered that you have done a lot of research.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Amazing.
I wouldn't have brought such a bio.
Yeah. This is amazing. That's why I said this is one of the most amazing bios I've ever read. And I would just like to go to the last line, where you said you believe that one day Africa will become the beacon of global technology and commerce. Can you break that down for us? Like, what do you mean as a thought leader? This line, what does it mean to you?
So when I take a look at Africa, we are that continent in the world where we have the greatest number of young people that are potentially going to be impactful in the next coming decades. So right now, the median age in Africa is 19 years, right? And if you push that into the future, 2030, 2040, you're going to have Africa having the largest youth population in the world, which is in the order of billions. Now, how do you get to sustain that type of a community? The only way you can get to sustain that type of a community is if you get to create a tertiary industry that is more based on services, but more particularly based on technology and commerce. So when I'm looking at this, it's two things at the same time. The first thing is that I've seen a lot of potential that is within young Africans and their willingness and desire to shape how the future will look like for the world. And then I also see the technical problem that is tied to the population size of Africa. So I see it as an opportunity, and I know that every country that is going through the same types of population growth and potential business growth, like Africa is currently going through, like India, like China, they have become the nexus point of technology and commerce, but it all depends on what we do in the next coming years.
That's really amazing. I actually agree with that because I was reading this article and they said that Africa has a potential in terms of human capital, but now as I was reading the article, one of the things that I asked myself was, do we have enough resources to accumulate the increase in the number of youth population? As you've mentioned that by 2030 we'll be having the greatest number of youth population in Africa.
That's the question.
So do you think we have enough resources to accumulate or to accommodate the growing number?
I think the resource that's most important, especially now, is human capital. And this argument can be made even at so many other different points in time. But I think the most important thing that we can get to invest in when it comes to Africa are the young people themselves, get them exposed not necessarily to all the education in the world, but to education that will be relevant in the next coming years. So an example is, right now we understand that we're on the precipice of an entirely magnanimous change in terms of how the world works, based on technology like AI, right? And also blockchain. These two are so revolutionary in the way that they're going to impact our world. But for so long, one of the main things that we've been doing that I think might be a mistake is trying to catch up to where the world is. So right now, we're trying to see how can we be like the United States, or how can we be like China, or how can we be like these other countries that we consider to be developed. But whilst we try to play catch up, we never actually get to catch up because we're always one step behind. So I think the secret is in getting to expose young Africans to the technology that is going to be relevant in the next 5 years. So as opposed to being taking a step back to say, when it comes to AI, we don't want to interact with that. Our policies or our policymakers don't want to have anything to do with that because, quote unquote, it's not yet practical for African communities. I think this is the moment where we get to change the character that we are wearing. So if our character has always been the ones that are trying to play catch up, it's time that we change that character and play the ones that are leading. Like sometimes when you see African countries, right, and there's no development, you're like, well, we're so behind. But then that's also the opportunity for us to build certain types of technology that have never been seen in the world. Because then you don't have to destroy so many buildings and so much infrastructure to implement this new technology. So I think that's the perspective that we need to have, to couple that with the spirit of entrepreneurship, which is problem solving in your own local context, in your own way.
So that's amazing. And of course, I followed how you started. Like you're doing computer science, right? And you, as much as you're doing computer science, you never forget about, let's say the mission of the school, which is to educate entrepreneurial leaders. And how has the area of computer science, together with the mission of school, impacted you in terms of the things that you have achieved so far, or with that, with like you being as a thought leader? Like how do you integrate that computer science and of course the advantages that the school is always teaching us to be entrepreneurial, and with your goal of you're already a thought leader, with your like this mindset of you being a thought leader where you become an expert in a certain area, let's say technological and commerce. So how do you integrate them, and how far have you gone?
I would say one word: problems. Follow the problem. So when I look at, so Ashesi is heavy on entrepreneurship, and then I'm currently doing computer science, and there's a lot of conversation around how do we get to do a lot of problem solving within the community. When I look at it, I don't see them as different domains. I always see them as shared spheres that impact each other, because I'm looking for problems in the world. The reason why I enjoy computer science more than anything is that the entire art of the subject area is how do you get to solve problems. Doesn't
true.
matter it's music, it doesn't matter it's art, it doesn't matter it's AI. The fundamental question is how can you take this problem and express it in such a way that would be able to solve it in a much simpler way. So that's why I'm attracted to computer science. And then entrepreneurship, the first lesson I remember was before you think about creating a solution, make sure you really understand what the problem is. And fortunately or unfortunately, I'm always seeing problems all around. So for example, if I'm speaking about Chariot, because I am particularly focused about digital access, right? How that particular inspiration came was through the deep research into the barriers that have existed in as far as digital access in Africa is concerned for the past 30 years. And suddenly, before I knew it, what was a zeal that I had whilst I was going through that research and that passion evolved into a possible idea that I crafted into my mind, and then evolved into a pitch for some initial funding. And before I knew it, it was now a business that is on the ground.
Wow.
So I think that's how the different things come together, trying to solve problems with what I have, with what I can do. Not every problem. I can't solve every problem, but with the few knowledge that I have, what type of a problem could I solve for my community?
Oh, that's amazing. And of course, as you mentioned, Chariot, which is your current business that you're trying to run and solving problems of digital access in rural communities. So I was just wondering, because according to what I've read on your profile, you launched Chariot in Ghana. So I would like to know the decision behind that, because I believe that your country, which is Zimbabwe, faces the same problem. I think most African countries,
they have the challenge of digital access. It's almost the same across the board.
So was the reason, like, I just want to know the reason why you decided your target market to be like Ghana first before Zimbabwe. Is it because you realize that the problem is common, and if it's successful in Ghana, then it can work in Zimbabwe? Or what was
so that's certainly one of the reasons. The fact that the problem is so universal in Africa, and the fact that the fundamental causes behind the problem are the same within different African countries certainly made it the case that if we could do it in Ghana, then it might be possible for us to do it in Zimbabwe. So let me just break that down a bit. What are the fundamental problems of digital access? Number one, devices are very expensive for people to purchase. Any person in a rural community cannot purchase those $100 US, $150 US devices, or even more. I won't speculate about the bigger ones, right? They are also living in areas which have fundamentally been withheld from any sort of digital penetration. Internet service providers typically don't set up internet infrastructure in rural communities because they don't think they'll make a return, right? And then besides that, those same areas are also the areas that don't have electricity access. And then those same areas are also the areas that have not had a community where these digital resources, as they've been evolving, that knowledge base has been shared amongst the community members. So if you're trying to solve digital access in Africa, the first question is, are these four things touched or tackled? And you realize that all these four problems are almost the same in all these African countries, right?
That's true.
So that's the first part. But the second part, the reason why I did it here in Ghana is because part of entrepreneurship, or a very important part of entrepreneurship, is interacting directly with your customer, getting feedback, and iterating.
That's true.
They say that one interaction with a physical customer is worth 1,000 ideas, because you have a lot of ideas that are based on assumptions. Then someone tells you that what you're actually thinking is the problem. It's not really the problem
until you consult with your potential customer.
Since I was here in Ghana, I thought it would be good for us to get more time to interact with our customer and really get to formulate the solution more. I'm sure when we expand, the plan is to expand to all the African countries, but Zimbabwe is certainly closer. It's the next country on the line. But I'm sure we'll tweak it a bit when we get there, but it was first important to get a solid product at the start.
That's amazing. One of the things maybe that people don't understand when maybe I described you as a thought leader, that's how you describe yourself. Maybe they didn't understand they don't understand what it means. Like, can you break it down? Like, because the way I understand it, I think a thought leader is just like somebody who finds an area of interest, they build their curiosity, they create content around that, and maybe they provide solutions around that area. So for you, how do you define thought leadership given all the things that you have done so far? How would you describe thought leadership?
I think it might be simpler than it might seem on the surface.
Okay.
The way that I define thought leadership is the ability to think. And what I mean by the ability to think is, are you able to reconcile external knowledge with personal experience?
Oh.
So there's usually two problems. You can be a person who bases their entire interaction with the world based on their own personal experience. And whilst it might be true that you had those personal experiences and you are entitled to think in certain ways because of those personal experiences, they might not hold true for all the other things that are happening around you in the world. And if you come with that type of a mindset, you're most likely going to meet a lot of roadblocks because what you're sharing does not account for everything that's happening in the system, right? On the opposite side, you can be someone who's so outward looking and the only thing you do is to get to absorb information that is coming from outside,
sources,
which is one of the challenges that I have with universities, many universities, that suddenly it seems to be the case that many young people, when they get there, all they do is to just absorb knowledge and they're no longer questioning the information that they're absorbing. So thinking is, okay, my life, I've lived on this planet for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. And based on my own personal experience, this is what I think the world is. Then this is the view that everyone else outside is claiming about the world. How can I solve that simultaneous equation? If you can solve that simultaneous equation, suddenly you can transcend from the personal to the communal to the global. So if you can do that, you become a thought leader. If you are in any one of these two, where you either think only about self or you think only about what others are telling you and you never reconcile the two, then you're not a thought leader.
So do you think for the young people, the most important thing right now, as you have described that, thought leadership is about you thinking and creating maybe your own perspective on how you view the world compared to you just, absorbing knowledge from other people? Do you think that's what the youth needs for us to be where we're supposed to be?
Certainly.
Wow.
Certainly.
I
could give an example if you want me to.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So an example is, take a look at popular culture in Africa, right? So certain times you can meet with youth that feel like everything that comes across the seas is important, and everything that comes from within the continent it's not important, right? It's ish, right?
Yeah, it's ish, yeah.
And then you have another group of people who say, because they are so committed to where they are, they don't want to listen to anything that's coming from outside.
Yeah.
Both these groups of people do themselves a disservice because the world is not that simple. Being pragmatic is about always asking yourself the question, how can I get to reconcile, right, all this set of knowledge to achieve my own outcomes. So maybe I'm a passionate African, I love my African identity. And part of my African identity is that I have a lot of respect for my parents, for my family. We keep that tight-knit nuclear family, right? And then there's also a perspective that in order to have economic development, maybe you need to create more high-rise cities. And if you see the development of cities, it usually puts people in different places, right? And it's much harder to keep that bond of families connected. But then you don't need to take one side to say, if I'm going to love my family, then I can't accept this modern infrastructure or I wouldn't say modern, but okay, this setup, right, from outside, modern in quotes, right? Or if I'm going to be modern, then I can't keep my family. You're supposed to ask yourself, how is it possible for me to keep those values that I keep dear as an African, whilst also accepting the very utility of these other systems of economics or even systems of national structure that are coming from outside. If you do that, then you become a Lee Kuan Yew of a type.
Yeah, Lee Kuan Yew,
being pragmatic.
Yeah,
right?
I think I think he's one of the leaders that really inspired me. Looking at how he just took Singapore from zero, and I think he was more like intentional. Sometimes when you're aware of what is happening around the world, and around you, it's easy for you,
and you know yourself.
You know yourself as well. It's just easy for you to create. So that's solid, man. That's solid. So there's one question that I don't want to miss out. You know, you're part of the you were part, or you're part of Melton Foundation?
I'm part of the Melton because it's like a lifelong. It's called a lifelong fellowship.
A lifelong fellowship. Oh, that's amazing. Which like offers like diverse pathways for leaders that are passionate about social change. So my question is, how much has this program influenced the person that you are right now in terms of how you think about social change, in terms of everything that we have discussed so far? How much impactful has Melton Foundation been?
I think the Melton Foundation has really been a transformative experience because it gave me the opportunity to get to put to the test some of my hypotheses about the world. So when you hear about China or you hear about India, you formulate an entire perspective of what China is, or what a Chinese person is, or what a person from India is, or what a German. You create all these pictures in your mind, but those pictures are particularly a direct consequence of the narrative that is crafted by whosoever is controlling the media framework, right? So getting into the Melton Foundation, I got an opportunity to interact with people from different parts of the world, but getting to interact with them on a more personal level. We became, I can say, we were 24 in our batch. All the 23, exclusive of myself,
were from different countries.
They were not all from different countries. They came from 6 different regions of the world.
Okay.
But all of them, by the time I left the foundation, I felt like we had gotten to a significant degree of friendship. Because we had that ability to get into each other's personal spaces and get to learn each other's cultures from an up-close perspective. And it is often the case that those things that you don't know, you're often afraid of them. You don't want to interact with them. But most of your assumptions of them are often offsetted by a bias that you yourself might not be even aware of. But when you interact with all these people, you then get to realize that after all, we are all a shared human race. And we all have those same fundamental, that same fundamental humanity at the bottom. And at the same time, you also get to develop an internal mechanism to know that difference is not a challenge. Difference is not a cause for you to be at each other's throats. It should be the case that you can be different and still exist peacefully. You can be different and still collaborate.
I think that's the most essential thing, being in an environment where you guys have different perspectives. Because just think about it. You're all in a group of 24 people, and everything that you say, they believe that's the right way. I don't think that being in a realm of minds that are not challenging each other, it doesn't build any growth. So I think that's really crucial. So now I'll move on to, of course, you have done so well here at Ash's University. You have outstretched yourself, trying to figure out things, because I think one of the things as well, as a thought leader, you always have to sacrifice, outstretch, allow your mind to explore a lot of things. You have done career. In your first year, I think there was this agricultural competition that you won. Yes, you have done, you have been part of. I don't remember. I've done a lot, man.
No, you don't need to remember.
Yeah. So, and for that reason, you were nominated as, the star image in the Ubora Awards, right? And you were also nominated as the most innovative student. You're also nominated as the rising star how has that nomination or those nominations, what impacts did they bring to you? Those nominations, yeah.
It's interesting.
And what do they mean to you?
So, when I look back at it personally, I've never really desired too much awards that are based on popularity.
I saw that you wrote it on your LinkedIn.
So because one of the things that's hard for me to accept is you do something. Let's say you do something good, and then now you also need to go to people and remind people, hey, you remember I did that, and I did that, and I did that, and I did that. So vote for me. Right? It doesn't tie, and I think it works for different people. It works differently because they also have a different way of perceiving it. But for me, those two values, I think, basing on my own personal values, they don't go together well. But one of the things that I do appreciate, or the utility that I appreciated from it, is the fact that any person from within the school community can get to nominate you and say, I see this in you. And that, for me, I think it reflected the power of just doing the things that you are passionate about, and the things and trying to create the change that you feel is necessary within a given domain. And if not you achieving the change, you know that you have impacted someone even without you knowing them. So I think that was the thing that I appreciated the most. Just that I've been able to get to reach some people that I didn't even know I had reached. So that was the thing that was meaningful to me about those nominations.
That's amazing. You seem to be too focused. just a little bit of curiosity. How did you deal with the rejections? As much as you have done a lot of great things, but of course
lots of rejections as well.
How did you deal with that in any aspect of your life? How did you deal with that?
I think learning to deal with rejection was something that I might have learned more heavily in the later parts of my life, because I think during college applications I had a lot of rejections, and so many other places I also met a lot of rejections. But one of the things that I think was so important was never tying my identity or my self-worth to what I can do. So usually there's this statement that if it is said as a proverbial statement where you know that it's speaking to something else, but it's not taken literally, right? That you are what you do, or you are your achievements. If you take it proverbially, it's okay. But if you take it literally, it will kill you and it will crumble you.
It will crumble
because what that means is
true.
Every time you get a rejection, you doubt your self-worth.
You take it personal.
But your self-worth is not determined by what you have done. It is merely determined by the fact that you are actually a human being who exists. That value of being a human being
it's more important than any
independent.
Other thing. Oh God.
So you already come with value, right? That value is not something that you define for yourself. It's value that was already defined for you by your creator. And then what you do is now getting to showcase those things that those who are outside cannot see, but you have inside. So sometimes it won't work, right? But don't take it as though it's a denying of the value that you have. So that's so it can be really painful, and I've gotten some rejections that I was like, hey,
I can relate.
after all, right? But then knowing that what you do is not equivalent to who you are. That's one of the first things that's important.
I think I was always like facing the same thing. Like every time I get a rejection, imagine like applying for this big company, get to the final round and you're like, yeah, I got it. And then the results come, boom, rejection.
And it always starts with an interesting
thank you.
Thank you. Once you see that it didn't begin with a congratulations, it began with some statement,
But once they say thank you for your interest, oh God, just know you're not. But you know what I learned from all those rejections is that rejection is not bad at all. Rejection is redirection.
Yes.
Perhaps God didn't want you to go through that way, because one thing I've decided to do from now on is that let His will be my will, let His way be my way, let His wish be my wish. I can't determine what's good for me. He can determine what's good for me. So if I get rejected, that's okay.
And you certainly cannot take any path that has not been allowed for you to take.
So that's one of the things that was an interesting answer. So now I would just like to, because of time, right? I would just like to, play a little game.
Okay.
It's called the Line Recall Challenge.
Okay.
The Line Recall Challenge, because you're one of those guys who create a lot of content on your LinkedIn. You always write your thoughts, put them there for people to read or get inspired. So I want to see how much you remember what you said, and you'll say why you said it, where you said it.
I hope I won't be caught
so the first one that you wrote that I found very interesting was: the thing that dreaded me for all my life to this day turned out not to be as dangerous as I thought it would be.
Why did you have to start from that? Why did you have to start? But I think that one was for the human library. And it was about learning how to swim. It was a LinkedIn post. And I think that same topic is actually what inspired a TED Talk that I had later. But it was...
And the reason why it was so insightful was the thing that I dreaded for all my life to this day turned out not to be as dangerous as I thought it would.
Okay, that's amazing. It's good that you remember, because I read that on your post and I went on to, you said the same thing on your TED Talk, which was really inspiring. That was a good TED Talk, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next line that you said, I posed to wonder how much of miracle it is that any human exists on the face of this planet, and how much we should genuinely care for each other in sincerity and truth for the little time we have together.
That's mischievous, right? So that's a post that I recently made on my LinkedIn. I think it was a day ago or so. But the thing that I was appreciating there is that if you take a look at there's so many things on this planet that could make this planet uninhabitable. I was looking at the Villarrica volcano, one of the most active volcanoes in the world. And just getting to learn how drastic the damage can be caused by that volcano, and thinking about all the other things like earthquakes and tsunamis and all those. There's so many things. Even think about bacteria. There's some types of bacteria that if the UV light on this planet was not just the right amount, no life would be on this planet. So you get to realize that the fact that we are on this planet, it's a miracle. It's not a mumbo jumbo. It's a genuine miracle. And we should appreciate that, because then it means that there is a reason why we're here. And then it means that the interactions we have with each other should be based on being sincere and being truthful, because after all, we have a very short time period to be on this earth. And that's something we need to think about seriously.
Amazing. I guess you remember all your lines, man. You know your story.
I hope so.
So another one, you said in one of your contents, and this was exactly a year ago. That's not exactly a year ago, but it was 1 year ago. You said this, and I'll ask a question based on this.
Okay.
Yeah. But first, you will identify what you said. Regardless of all of this, I would like to remind you that at the center of every decision you make should be the concern of those who have empowered you to be their empowerer.
Wow.
What a line.
Wow, it's
What a
interesting. You're taking me back. You're taking me back in a mental journey, because usually my thoughts are connected, very connected. So that's a letter I was writing to myself. Dear future me.
Oh, that's how you
I think it was just one of those things that I wanted to remind myself, because I think that the more you grow, especially there's a saying which says power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
That's not Nelson Mandela quote, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's
that's his quote. I think I remember reading it somewhere. Yeah.
So now I just decided to write something that would remind me that if you find yourself in a position of leadership, even though it seems as though you are so powerful and you can now do all these things, because the higher you go, the fewer the checks and balances that are on you, even though it seems that way, you should know that the people that you're leading and you're serving, they're not naive for putting you into that position. They actually have put their trust into you, that you will help them reach their own visions and their own life goals. So never take it for granted. So that was what the letter was about.
Amazing, man. You've written a lot of stuff, and it's really nice that you I don't think I would remember, because sometimes some thoughts they just go away. Okay, so the last one goes most of the transformation needed in the world just requires people to have a genuine conversation in pursuit of understanding beyond obvious differences.
That was a post that I was making as a recently announced senior fellow, and I was just sharing my experience, but in a summarized version of what the Melton Foundation felt like. And one of the things that you realize in most modern day conversation is that people get into the conversation with already a predefined position, and they're getting into the conversation just to argue for the sake of arguing. So it's like it's almost definite that the end of that discussion is you keep what you think, I keep what I think. But then why engage in the discussion in the first place? There's some things that can obviously be different amongst us, but they don't need to be everything amongst us. And just like I was speaking about, you not tying your identity with what you do, it's also very important not to reduce a person to one particular characteristic. Because once you do that, it becomes impossible to interact with them in any other domain. Maybe we don't think about the same way politically, or maybe we don't think about we don't like the same team. I am blue, you're red, right? But I should never trivialize the complexity of who you are as a human being by tying it to one characteristic. It can be possible for us to have a genuine interrelation without always coming back to one single factor. Maybe that factor is something that someone will actually change, but you'll never get to change them if your fundamental premise is that they need to think like me on this aspect when you're getting onto the conversation. You won't change it. So.
I think there's this saying that don't listen to respond.
Listen to understand.
Yes. That's the most, because there are people who just listen because they have this fire in them. They want to
they'll actually sometimes they can actually scratch. They know already what the person is going to say, so they just go to scratch, so that once the person responds, then they begin to share what they think and never taking anything. They're only taking out and out.
I think that's a stereotype that we should always, by all means, try to avoid. Because there's so much that people can offer. And when you think about it, you realize that maybe I just know 0.01%. I know nothing.
And that's also the beauty of knowledge. It's always distributed amongst the masses. Because most of the knowledge is experiential and consequential, and you can't have all the experiences in life. So sometimes it just needs you to listen so that at least you can expand the way you think about this world.
That's true. I mean, that was amazing. Before we close, I would like to, what advice would you give to people who want to be thought leaders, to people who are concerned about what is happening around us, who want to build solutions, who have these ideas that in their minds, because I believe that everyone has an idea, but the problem is, how do you get to develop that idea? How do you get the inspiration to start implementing? How can I say, defeat doubt and start doing what you're thinking?
So I think one of the things that would be very important for any young person is to be able to tell their own story. So when you say history, right, if you break it down, it's like his story.
Right?
And you can afford to forget so many things in life. The one thing you can't afford to forget is your own story.
Yeah.
Because once you forget that, you become a cog in some other person's story, right? Now, for you to know your story, it now needs you to think. And remember the definition of thinking that I was saying. Reconcile your personal experiences with the external knowledge, right? If you can reconcile these two, then suddenly you begin to understand, why did these particular things in my life happen in the way they did? And now, because you know why, you can get to set out your own objectives. If you don't understand, whenever you're interacting with anything in life and you're not at the level that's discussing the why of how things are happening, know that you're so far away from understanding anything because you're in the how, right? So it means you're a tool, right? So if you want to be a thought leader, if you want to get that idea that you've always had out there into the world, transforming the world, first master your story. When you know your story, even the thing that will push your idea forward is people getting to know your story and buying into that story. So first know your story before you start doing anything else.
That's the most important thing here. Knowing your story is really important, because I just realized that even when you go to pitch, if you master your own story, let me tell you a secret. A reality. Most of my interviews these days, I don't prepare so much that I have to cram stuff in my head, because I know myself. I know my story. I know what I'm interested in, and I know what I want to do. And if you know what you want to do, there's no need for you to sit 24/7 and you're trying to cram, you're trying to read, and there's no need.
If you know knowledge means something to you,
it means
so you
something.
won't forget.
And when you share it, the person interviewing you will actually understand that this person, they know what they're talking about. So it's really important to know how to master your own craft. Know your story, know what you're all about. What is it that you're interested in? What is it that you like the world to see? I think that's what makes everyone different, right? So thank you so much for joining us. This brings us to the end of the podcast, man. Thank you, man. Thank you. This
was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a pleasure having you. This was really insightful, and I hope you at home have learned something from this podcast. How to be a thought leader. It's really important to know your story, know yourself, and connect your story to the external, things that are happening, and with what you of course think within yourself. So thank you so much, man, once more, and thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're still growing, of course, so we can share our content to your friends so that they can get to join us and listen to the most inspirational people that I always bring to my podcast. This is International Mic Check, and my name is Judesho. See you next time with another episode. Man, thank you.
Thank you.
Say peace to the camera.